Hello. So if you watched my last video, you would remember that last time I talked about this guy, Metatron, with his stupid video about was Nazism right or left wing. No doubt that Hitler declared himself right wing. No, that doesn't play a role. No doubt that all of their policies were right wing, that the far right today is based on them. No, he still actually tried to argue that they were leftist. So today we are going to see, was fascism left or right wing? Which, first of all, this question is disqualified from the start because fascism and Nazism are the same thing. So this question is destroyed from the start. This question is disqualified and invalid from the start. But let's see what our good friend Metatron has to say.
Hello, noble ones.
Hello.
Recently released a thought-provoking video titled
He recently released a propaganda piece, not a thought-provoking video.
Was Nazism left-wing or right-wing? This video, as I had expected, has created a little bit of a fuss, if you will. A ripple in the lake.
Yes, because you lied a lot in it. And you poisoned the fuck out of the well, and then you said that you are trying to promote critical thinking while bitching and moaning that Hitler was part of your religion.
A storm in the blue and red sky, I suppose. A dent in the matrix. The primary objective was to elucidate the inherently...
A dent in the matrix. The primary objective was to elucidate
limitations of reductionist...
the limitations of reductionist...
categorization within the political paradigm.
Okay, so he's not just poisoning the well and trying to look smart, because he understands that his last video didn't look good because he wasn't trying to look that smart. So now he's trying to look smart and to be an authority on the subject, even though his degree is in ancient history.
And to propose a more nuanced framework for understanding complex historical phenomena. This way...
It's not very complex. When something is right-wing, when the right-wing is based on it today, when they declare themselves right-wing, there is no complex. Also, fascism is 100% right-wing, man, because they're the same thing. But let's see what our favorite boy Metatron has to say.
Encouraging the viewer to make their own mind and come to their own conclusion, applying critical...
You can watch my response video to that one, but he did not promote any sort of critical thinking. He disregarded the 14 rules of fascism. He lied a lot and bitched and moaned about Hitler being a Christian. And then he said he promotes critical thinking while literally priming the viewer to agree with him.
Thinking. A skill that I want to say we are slowly losing. Well, some people got it 100%, other people completely missed the point. And then you've got those that believe that,
So some people agreed with me and others disagreed with me and provided arguments, and I just don't like that people disagree with me. Basically, that's what he's saying here.
You shouldn't be allowed to speak if you disagree with them. Excellent Nazi tactic, by the way.
No one says you can't speak. We just say that you used dog whistles, Metatron. You can't deny that you used dog whistles, right? In that video, he's literally just mad that people pointed out his use of rampant dog whistles and his defending of the funny mustache man. Literally, he's just mad that people pointed out his defense of the funny mustache man.
Positive note instead, we've got two historians, these two gentlemen that made response videos to my original video, and I think these were absolutely fantastic. I love it for a change.
Yeah, trying to look humble. We can see how he's seething inside right now. He's seething that people critiqued him.
When people are actually respectful in the way they make response videos to me instead of like, liar, liar, liar.
Why do you want me to say liar? No one who makes response videos to you says liar, liar, liar. Metatron. No, you just don't like to hear the truth. You don't like to hear arguments that point out that you do not understand. You are not politically aware. Seeing that you call them leftist just because Marx was a bit racist. You are not politically aware at all. Just because they had some healthcare, which was only for Germans, and you call them leftist, that actually proves that you aren't the fact that you use an American left-right political spectrum, and in America there is no left-right political spectrum as the both parties are right-wing, shows how not politically aware you are, Metatron.
So thank you so much, guys, for responding. Really appreciate it. You are awesome, and I will leave link to the response videos down below. New policy. If you are respectful in your responses, whether you agree...
By respectful, he means do not say anything bad about him.
With me or not, you get featured. No, not you. As for the original video, today's video's core tenet and focal point is to provide an opportunity for reflection on two things. One, the faulty nature of the question proper.
The faulty nature of the question? What do you mean? Fascism is a far-right ideology that was conceived as a far-right ideology. What do you mean the faulty nature of the question? It's a very simple question. Analyze the policies, see if they were leftist or not. And if you can do mathematical average, which apparently you cannot, and see that most of their policies are right-wing, which the rule of potential average says that they were right-wing, as it is the majority of the potential coefficient of the average, if you do an average of all their policies. It's a basic mathematical rule in statistics. You learn in 5th grade.
As some things just don't jive with the elements we expect from the right and left dichotomy.
The thing is, he doesn't understand the right and left dichotomy. He's a right-winger, first of all, which already gives him bias. He also doesn't understand what a leftist is. He doesn't get what a leftist is, and he will never get it, because he doesn't know anything about political science. He also doesn't know anything about 20th century history, as I will repeat myself, his degree is in ancient history. He's out of his lane here, talking out of his ass, basically.
Inadequacy of 21st century politics in a 20th century.
He's repeating the thing even though the political spectrum from since then hasn't changed a lot.
Heuristic device. And I mean, this shouldn't really surprise us. At the end of the day, this binary model doesn't really leave much space for nuance, does it? As stated in the original video, I still suggest...
You don't have nuance, you called him a leftist. You literally made these guys, because he's disguising it very well, but he used dog whistle words. Dog whistle, such as Yahtzee is a slur, right? He said that, which is a dog whistle that fascists used to identify each other, right? It's a masked dog whistle. He's literally a fascist, seeing from the words he used, which are called dog whistles, which I said already. He is a fascist. So whatever he's saying here, he is lying. Okay, we need to establish that. Whatever he's saying here is lying, because he proved himself to be an actual fascist by his weird behavior.
That the fundamentals of this question, was it left-wing or right-wing, is in fact incongruent, particularly when viewed from a 21st century perspective, and often an American one at that, when the topic of discussion is indeed 20th century European extreme political regimes. We expose, therefore, the
20th century European extreme political regimes. Not a lot of things have changed since then. Not a lot of political theory has been published since then. It is not a bad question or a historical syllogism. No, it is not. It is simply what they declare themselves. The fascism is a far-right idea, and most political theorists that aren't fascists agree on that.
The contingencies of time and space that make the framing of the question somewhat invalid or not apt for delineating and accurately
It is not an invalid question.
Describing.
Why does he keep repeating himself? Do you see how in this whole video he is not saying anything of substance? He is just repeating himself, that the question doesn't make sense, so he can assure himself he can sleep well at night. He is not saying anything of substance here.
These 20th century's historical parties. Moreover, the video offered a third option, by describing these regimes as totalitarian dictatorships instead, rather than trying to fit them in a left or right box. We could successfully...
You just don't like the truth. The Nazis were right-wing. Far-right, racists. You just don't like the truth because you're a right-winger, and it hurts you. It hurts you to know that you, yourself, identify with the same ideology that the fascists did. That's why he's doing apologetics, because he doesn't like to be identified with the same ideas.
Shift the focus to the regime's operational mechanics, ideological underpinnings, and socio-political impacts. Just like I mentioned on the first video when talking about the word or the slur Nazi, today we're talking about...
Okay, once again, the dog whistle. Did you catch it? Nazi as a slur. It is what all of them say, and if you hear someone saying that Nazi is a slur, they are a Nazi. That is the rule. You can look up dog whistles and you're going to see that Nazi is a slur is one of them, how the fascists identify each other.
About the word fascist. But once again, when this is used as a way to just attack or insult the other side...
It is not just used to attack and insult the other side. Do you see? Insult the other side. So he's identifying himself as a fascist. He's not even hiding anymore. He's not even hiding anymore. He understands that the other side is fascism, which is right wing. He literally just debunked himself by saying the other side. He just debunked himself by admitting, probably by mistake, that fascism is right-wing. He just debunked himself.
Or the opposite of your political persuasion. Even though that's very common, personally I find it to be a rather useless and unproductive exercise. I ask, is it useful critically to use this language at this point in time? And besides, let's also...
Yes, it is, because fascists still exist. You are a prime example of one. Trying to do masked, like he's trying to hide very hard here, but it's very clear what he's doing. Masked apologia.
Remember to just...
And the other thing I actually didn't catch in the video I watched, fun fact, you can go back and watch that. So he called Hitler an idiot, he called Stalin a monster, but he only called Mussolini a moron. And he is Italian, which also jumps at me, because with these guys, the masked Nazis, you need to be very careful with the words they use. And it was deliberate, I'm telling you. It was deliberate.
Calling someone a fascist doesn't make it so. Discourse rather than insults in my...
Look at him. He just... Calling someone a fascist doesn't make it so. He's so fucking self-aware, but he's trying to invalidate all the people who probably called him a fascist after he made that video. Literally, this video is just here. This is literally just a masked character defense of him moaning.
My opinion are in fact the best dynamic. Well, be that as it may, after I finish with this video and I present all of my information, if you still want to use fascist as a way to insult your political opponents...
Stop dog whistling. We are not using fascists to insult our political opponents. We are using fascists to refer to racist right-wingers like you.
I mean, freedom of speech. But at least you'll know exactly what you're saying. Because at the end of the day, we all know fascism is bad. Great. But what does it mean to be a fascist? What...
Oh my fucking god, what does it... Okay, so I'll put a working link, because last time, to the 14 rules of fascism. So, let's go. Fascism. Nationalism. So, I'll put a link if you don't believe me. Nationalism, hyper-nationalism, okay. Which is also, first of all, hyper-nationalism is right-wing. Xenophobia, blaming of immigrants or foreign citizens. The danger, but actually they're not dangerous of the enemy. For example, like these guys are savages, savage, backwards, unintelligent fuck, but they are also a mortal danger. Is also another rule of fascism, which again fits neatly on the right. Militarism, which leftists, true leftists, not what he understands by leftists, which leftists oppose the military, right? Militarism. And yeah, these are some of the rules of fascism. And as you can see, all of them are right-wing. So this video is nonsensical, because he's not going to use the widely academically accepted 14 rules of fascism. He's not. He's going to make up his own definition, probably, so that he can say that they were leftists, or actually to excuse them.
Is fascism. Now, do you remember the section of my original video where I demonstrated how historically the Nazis, the fascist and communist regimes took away your freedom of speech?
Nazis and fascists are the same thing. He also rambled much more about communists, right? Communists were much worse. Like, I caught it on. He was doing, like, he rambled about Hitler and Stalin, but he didn't say anything about Mussolini, which is very sus. Very sus. And he's also trying to say Nazis and fascists, which again is very sus, as they were of the same ideology. He is very sus right now. He's basically trying to excuse the fascists for being Nazis. Also, communists are state capitalist. The USSR were not communists, they were state capitalist, and you can actually say they were right-wing because they were destroying culture and promoting Russian exceptionalism. The USSR were not true leftists. But he's still confusing this, and he's also doing the very sus thing of saying fascist and Nazi are different.
As a result of their, authoritarian struggle for utter control of the masses. Well, in light of that, today I ask the question, was fascism left-wing or right-wing? I ask it because the very suppression of such inquiries mirrors, ironically, the very totalitarian practices of fascist regimes.
Suppression my ass, man. The widely accepted 14 rules of fucking fascism. There's no suppression. You are not being suppressed. You can say whatever the fuck you want. It doesn't mean you're right. By suppression, you mean people don't let you lie on the internet. Metatron. People don't let you get away with lying. And this whole video is very weird because fascism and Nazism is the same thing.
Regimes. And to all those that tell me, don't you dare speaking about this again? Very fascist of you. Gentile and Mussolini would be proud. I ask it because you and I are free to inquire with dignity. Therefore,
We are free, but we're not free to use well poisoning, because you just poisoned the fuck out of the well, and also did a character defense for yourself, and are trying to say that fascism and Nazism are different. And are also trying to... Was fascism right or left wing? Fascism was so very obviously right wing. God.
For I don't just ask this question today, but I also ask you to continue to ask it, so that this may never happen again. Was fascism left-wing or right-wing?
Get to the point and stop poisoning the well.
Historically, the Partito Nazionale Fascista's government of Italy from 1922 to 1943 is traditionally demarcated into three evolutionary phases: the seizure of power, consolidation, and expansion. The latter often regarded
Yes, that's true, and he was right wing in both of them.
as the regime's most oppressive period. This tripartite periodization offers a framework for analyzing the regime's progression and impact. Benito Mussolini, commonly referred to as Il Duce, emerges as a pivotal figure in the 20th century European history. His ascension to power in Italy and the subsequent establishment of a fascist state had profound implications not only for Italy, but for the global political landscape.
Yeah, he's right so far. I'm very scared of I'm very scared of what he's gonna say next, but he's right so far, yeah.
Born in 1883 in the provincial town of Predappio, Mussolini's formative years were characterized by socialist inclinations mixed.
Oh, he's gonna do the thing. Mussolini used to be socialist, therefore the fascists were socialist. I can see what he's doing. He's bringing this up so he can make you think that the fascists were so... He's planting the seed into your mind. He's priming you to have this in your mind. I can see it. I catch it.
To nationalistic sentiments. The March on Rome in October 1922 marked a critical juncture in Mussolini's rise to power. This orchestrated show of force effectively intimidated.
See how he didn't mention how his socialist inclinations disappeared? Let me fill in the blanks for you. Let me fill in the blanks. In the 1910s, he was kicked out of his socialist paper because he started to spew more nationalistic right-wing shit. And he had a grudge against them, so he became a right-winger. Metatron didn't mention that part where Mussolini radically changed his views and declared himself a right-winger. No, he just skipped over that, leaving you think that he was still a socialist.
The Italian government and King Vittorio Emanuele III, faced with the prospects of civil war, capitulated, appointing Mussolini as...
Yeah, he's right here, but see how he actually didn't, he just didn't mention Mussolini's political transformation, which is a key part of his biography.
Prime Minister. This event heralded the inception of fascist rule in Italy, a regime that would endure until 1943. But now let's start focusing a little bit more on the minds of those persons that created it. In this case, the father of its theory, Giovanni Gentile, and the executing arm. Mussolini could easily be described as a demagogue. So, what is a demagogue?
Yes.
Well, in this context, this word refers to people who practice the idea of gaining support through the exploitation of popular desires and prejudices.
Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of what a demagogue is, but not. A demagogue is usually a self-proclaimed intellectual who is lying through his teeth. Using academic language, kind of like you, Metatron. And see how he's doing the population. All of what he's doing right now is priming you to think that the fascists were leftist. He's like psychologically influencing you to agree with him and think that the fascists are all of what he's saying, except for a few things, are lies. And he can lie because he can say some truth and then sneakily some lies,
rather than through rational argument or moral principle. Mussolini's rhetorical strategy was predicated on arousing the emotions of the populace, often at the expense of logical coherence or...
Okay, so see how he is doing the of the population, which is true. The thing is, it's true, but not only leftists are populists, but he knows what his audience thinks. So his audience thinks that only leftists can be populist. So he's priming. And see how he used the red shirt here, the red thingy, to signify leftism. I can see this symbolism, this psychological playing. He's using red colors when he's talking about fascism to signify leftism. He's trying to associate it in your head. He's conditioning you right now, literally.
Considerations. In this sense, one could say that Mussolini's political success was his embodiment of the demagogue archetype. The approach employed by Mussolini can be characterized by 1. Emotional manipulation, 2. Simplification of complex issues, 3. Scapegoating, in other words, identifying
Yes, that's true.
perceived enemies of the state,
Yeah, he's doing good stuff.
and 4. Charismatic
He didn't lie here. He didn't lie here.
performance. And when it comes to this last one, look at this. We're gonna check an original clip now. I mean, I've already shown a few, but
I'm scared. He's gonna do the leftists do that too. True leftists don't do that. True leftists use academic reasoning and shit.
check this one out. Look at the body language.
Aveva Cesare, Virgilio ed Augusto.
I don't want to be demonetized. I can't even be monetized yet.
You see, according to Gentile, one of the main and prominent thinkers that are behind the concept of fascism, there's no distinction between the private interest and the public interest, and everything.
Ooh, so that's leftist. Ooh, leftism. Yeah. So he's doing the thing where, see, fascists wanted to take away private property and make people identify with the state, which is very leftist, which is not true. Marxist perspective doesn't say that. Marxist says that you should do each according to his ability and to each according to his need. It is not the same thing as the state controls everything. If that's how it was put in practice, it doesn't mean that's what it should mean. But his audience doesn't know the Marxist perspective because his audience hasn't read Marx for shit, probably. And he's doing this thing to say that the fascists were leftist, but if you look at the rules of fascism, militarism and state control is one of them. And you don't have to be a leftist to want state control. Leftists don't want state control. True leftists. I'm not talking about Marxist Leninists. I'm talking about true leftists here. They do not want full state control. But actual Nazis and fascists, if you read their theory, they do want full state control. They want to abolish the individual for the nation. They are so nationalistic that every citizen should identify with the nation over the individual, which is a distinctly far-right ideology. Exceptionalism is a far-right ideology, and exceptionism taken to the extreme exactly what it means. The abolishing of the individual for the nation. You see yourself first as the nation, and secondly as the individual. That is actually one of the rules of fascism. Metatron.
Everything should be subordinate to the state. Let's now do a little bit of preliminary exploratory research. If we open the Wikipedia page on fascism, you'll notice that it says that fascism is a far-right authoritarian...
Case closed, Metatron. Case fucking closed. Wikipedia, Mussolini himself, all historians and thinkers who say it's far-right. Case fucking closed, Metatron. Even you admitting it, but then you're going to just brush past it like it never happened.
An ultra-nationalistic political ideology and movement. Now that is because in Europe, conventionally, that's the way it's taught. In Europe being the key. This is normally based on the fact that fascism opposed communism, and communism being at the extreme end of the left-wing paradigm, whenever we want to look at it this way, fascists being...
Okay, so he's now doing the from a European perspective to appeal to Americans, but the thing is that the political spectrum is the same everywhere. The actual political spectrum, not what he thinks, because he thinks that the Democrats in America are leftists, which they are not. They are also right-wing. He's doing the thing where, it's different in Europe, guys. No, it's not different in Europe or America. It's the same. And the fascists were right-wing any way you cut it. In any political spectrum, in any view, you have the fascists were far-right, unless your compass is so slanted right that the fascists are left of you. But for a normal person, the fascists are always to the right of them, to the far right of them. Don't do this rhetorical bullshit, Metatron.
In strong opposition against specifically Bolshevik communists, then of course it creates a kind of a neat dichotomy. Not to mention that there are parties...
No, it doesn't, because actually if you look at the USSR, they were closer to fascism, right? They had the 14 rules of fascism. The individual should identify with the state, the hyper-Russian nationalism and exceptionalism that existed, the spreading of the expansionism, which is the spreading of the revolution around the world. So if you look at it, the Soviets weren't true leftists. They were also fascist, right-wing fascists that masqueraded as leftists. And again, like I said in my last video, his argument is falling apart because he cannot understand the leftist perspective.
In Italy, they do derive from the ashes of the fascist movement, and they all, in this case, right-wing. Although, of course, they're not as extreme. I mean, obviously. But when we start looking at this from the American...
Obviously, because I am a right-winger and I don't think they are extreme, even though they are very extreme, even today. Like, his bias is showing so through.
perspective, then things change, and the situation becomes more nuanced, if you will. Fascism was big on public healthcare, the emergence of health policies with distinct fascist characteristics, which occurred in the late 1920s.
He's lying. Just like the Nazis, which again, because the fascists and Nazis are the same, the Nazis did have healthcare policy and only for the Germans. But this, if you look at it, this is literally the only leftist quote-unquote policy they had. And even this one wasn't leftist, as it was only for fucking Germans or only for Italians. He's literally not free healthcare because he is a right-winger and his audience is full of right-wingers, and when right-wingers hear free healthcare, they get triggered. This is literally why he's doing it. In his first video, he also brought up free healthcare, so he's bringing it up again to trigger people and say, "There's leftists." Even though, if you look at it, this being the only policy that is even remotely close to the left, the rest being right-wing. If you do the average, a mathematical statistical operation you learn in basic arithmetic, you will see that it comes out to right wing. Right, Mr. Metatron. And even the healthcare isn't leftist because it was only for Italians, only for Germans, which isn't leftism.
When we look at the consolidated structure of the fascist healthcare state, we'll see that it can be divided into three main constituents. The new welfare-based, called enti pubblici, the traditional ministerial bureaucracies.
Ooh, he mentioned welfare. He mentioned welfare, guys. So leftist. Yeah, it's not how it works. So welfare in fascist society existed, first of all, only if you served in the military, only if you had kids, only if you were an Italian man or a German man. These are all only that make it so very not leftist that it doesn't even matter. But he's of course going to gloss over all of these restrictions and stipulations and pretend like the healthcare was for everyone and the welfare was for everyone.
And local services. And in this case, when it comes to the focus or even fixation, one could say, on public health, the reason was, generally speaking, to foster population growth. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with fostering population growth, but when you're under this, it does have to be connected to then exploitation.
Yeah, to send them to war. Yeah. And actually, I could say that it is morally wrong to promote population growth. And you know, they were pro-life. They didn't have abortion rights, which are also a characteristic. Like a true leftist would promote abortion rights, but fascism didn't. And the right wing today promotes. The right wing today is anti-abortion, right? So yeah, another pinning the point that the fascists were right wing. And also, he is a pro-lifer, by the way. So yeah, he slanted, you know, very slanted bias.
Extreme taxation, military expansionism, and in general increasing the number of subjects. And
yeah, see, increased taxation is leftist, guys! No, increased taxation can be done in any militarist society. Any authoritarian state will take your income, especially a state that is built on war. Fascism is a expansionist ideology built on war. Increasing of taxes helps the war machine. Fundamentally, political science, economics 101. If you tax someone more, you have more money to spend on your expansionistic war machine. That doesn't make you a leftist. Leftism is progressive taxation, right? Progressive taxation and tax brackets and the redistribution of wealth. That is true leftism. He's just mentioning taxes to trigger his right-wing audience once again. And I dismantled it already by saying that any militarist state needs taxes. Any militarist state will raise its taxes, so it has the budget to pay for its war, for its perpetual war economy. Because fascism is a perpetual war economy. Because fascism has exceptionalism as its core, meaning that the country is in a state of constant war, meaning that people's income and needs and preferences come after the wishes of the state, the dictator, and the war machine, meaning that this is still a right-wing ideology, meaning that he is full of shit.
This expanded in 1925 with the Italian fascist regime created the Opera Nazionale Maternità ed Infanzia, which combined social welfare with the realization of the regime's demographic aims. So, public healthcare, big government, socialist roots, as I'll discuss on section 8, all of this makes it sound left-wing from an American perspective. But before we jump into the actual policies, let me
I already said it is not. The policies of the fascists were nationalism, which again is one of the rules of fascism, as I already said. Big government is a thing for all totalitarian states. And totalitarianism is inherently not leftist, as true leftism promotes liberty, meaning it is right-wing. Again, you can debunk every of his claims. See how he mentioned all the buzzwords? He knows the American conservative. Free healthcare, big government. God fucking.
swap the colors. And literally, for all the American friends of the platform, this is so confusing. Like, I get it that you wanted to use blue and red because those are the colors you've got on your flag. Beautiful flag, by the way. But
see how he's pandering? He's pandering to Americans here because Americans are retarded, man.
And again, red everywhere else is the commies. Anyways, you do you, whatever color you like. What do I know? We will focus on the theoretical...
The communist, yeah. See how he's priming you, literally.
fundamentals of fascism, which is one thing, and then the practical expressions of fascism, such as, for example, party organization, system of education, legislation, which then, of course, irreversibly bled into the education system proper.
Which are all right-wing. I already explained this, so let's see what he... If he keeps repeating himself, I'm gonna close the video. If he keeps repeating himself, I'm gonna close it, because there's nothing else to respond if he keeps repeating himself.
After all, as anyone who's ever studied history can tell you, nothing in politics happens by accident. Let's talk about the nature of fascism.
Combattenti di terra, di mare, dell'aria.
I don't speak Italian, so... I also don't see well enough to read the subtitles.
Cenere della rivoluzione e delle legioni.
Ah, the mention of revolution. A leftist word once again. But also, see, I forgot to mention how hypocritical he is. In his last video, he said that we shouldn't judge things on names. But now he's judging things on names just because he said revolution there. He's gonna say leftist because he said the word revolution. This is literally a game of semantics.
I personally reckon that fascism should absolutely be studied deeply, as its impact on European history was, one could say, incalculable. However,
Are you gonna get the point?
even though up to a certain extent we all know what fascism is, in reality, when you really think about it at an ontological level, its nature, its taxonomic and definitional characteristics...
It is right-wing. Look up the 14 rules of fascism, Metatron. Before to the most basic academic study on fascism. The 14 rules / characteristics of fascism. Before you come here and try to look smart, while clearly not having read the characteristics of fascism, which are widely accepted by political science.
may be elusive after all. I will strongly justify this statement later on this video. Sure, fascism did have its academic theoreticians, but then again, someone can also argue that fascism has no intellectual basis. It is...
Yes, it is, because, and you know what also has no intellectual basics? Conservatism. And conservatism is based on fear and nationalism. And the next step from conservatism is fascism, which is also based on fear and nationalism. Meaning that if you extrapolate and use fucking logic, conservatism is right-wing, and conservatism evolves into fascism, meaning that fascism is right-wing. Basic ideological frameworks here, Metatron. Basic political science. Basic movement. Basic statistics.
is in fact a baseless ideology. Let me defend that. When examining Benito Mussolini's boastful Balkany speeches, someone could say, well, in the words of Roger Scruton, that they are in fact an amalgam of disparate conceptions, which present a
Yes, but it's an amalgam of right-wing conceptions. That's the thing. They weren't leftists.
complex tapestry of political thought. This highlights the heterogeneous nature of fascist ideology, which is an
See how he's using big words here to look smart.
ideology of opportunity, but in a negative sense. This poses significant challenges for scholars attempting to formulate a unified theory of fascism. Professor Herney Turner Jr. astutely observes the recurrent pattern in fascism studies. Open quotes. Anyone who reads many studies on fascism as a multinational phenomenon cannot but be struck by the frequency with which writers who begin by assuming they are dealing with a unitary phenomenon.
Because they are. This guy is full of shit, whoever he is. See how he mentions all of these academics who agree with him or did a piss poor job of researching fascism, while he doesn't mention the main academic source for fascism, which has been developed ever since and actually does show that fascism can manifest anywhere. See how he's not mentioning the 14 rules of fascism here.
End up with several more or less discrete subcategories. Regardless of what criteria are applied, it seems very difficult to keep fascism from fragmenting. Close quotes. Turner's observations underscores a fundamental
He's not gonna mention it literally.
epistemological problem in the study of fascism, the tension between the desire for a comprehensive, universally applicable definition and the historical reality of diverse
Fascism does have a universally applicable definition. It's a long definition with 14 characteristics, which I can make a video reading out if you want to, guys. I can make a video explaining each of the 14 rules of fascism. Tell me in the comments if you want a video explaining the 14 rules of fascism in detail. But there is a definition of fascism, which is the 14 rules of fascism, which he's not going to mention or tie himself to. And I already told you the basic ones. But again, if you guys want to comment down, and if I see enough comments, I will make a video detailing the 14 rules of fascism.
Fascist movements with distinct national characteristics. This tension has led to a proliferation of subcategories.
She's right wing. He's literally describing right wing extreme conservatism here.
Categories and typologies within fascism studies, each attempting to capture the nuances of specific historical manifestations. And it is this very persistent fragmentation of fascism when placed under actual rigorous analytical scrutiny that presents us with a question. What defines fascism? Well, Turner posits a provocative hypothesis. He says, open quotes, that fascism as a generic concept has no validity and is without value for serious analytical purpose. Which is a lie.
This guy is, I don't know who this guy is, but he's like, again, he is not going to mention the basic sorts, the most basic academic source on fascism, 14 rules. He's going to mention some obscure guy who agrees with him, and also quote mining, probably. God.
Purposes, close quotes. This assertion should lead us to the re-evaluation of our basic assumptions about fascism. The nature of fascism in its fundamental values is in fact an old-school debate. So to help us define it, we should look not only at the minds that created it, but also, if not most importantly, the geopolitical situation and societal conditions that began its gestation in the early 1900s. Fascism intuition is a system of ideas evolving within the framework of a historical moment, cemented due to specific...
Yes, rooted in right-wing extremism, because fascism is rooted in fear of the unknown, anti-Semitism and racism, which are all characteristics of conservatism. And however you want to slant it, fascism is also rooted in deep religious text and symbolism, fear and hatred, which are all things that conservatism is built on, and fascism is just the next step after conservatism, which by logic means that they are of the same branch, by logic meaning that they are right-wing, which I already said. But he literally keeps repeating himself. I don't even know what to do, because he keeps repeating the same thing. Because I'm trying, guys, to not repeat myself, but if he keeps repeating the same thing, what the fuck do I do?
Historical conditions that facilitated a intellectual conversion towards the unitary conceptualization of dictatorial regimes. Just like any other ideology, fascism is a construct of the mind, so understanding the sort of societal pressures under which the mind...
Keep using big words to look smart, big boy. Come on, come on. Keep using big boy words to look smart.
...created the concept of fascism is paramount to our investigation. Fascist ideology was fortified through the employment of fear-mongering tactics and manipulative strategies, adeptly exploiting the anxieties, discontents, and prejudices prevalent in a society experiencing an economic crisis. It is crucial to note that the establishment of the regime's primary institution coincided with the zenith of the Great Depression that occurred in Italia in 1932. So,
Yes, which is actually why fascism began, because people were scared. Yes, I agree.
if you forget anything I say on this video, remember this. Fascism doesn't happen in a happy, thriving, and successful
Just like conservatism. Oh my God, just like conservatism. Conservatism and extreme conservatism doesn't happen in a happy society. Could it be because they are basically the same thing?
society. Therefore, here is my first definitional trait. Fascism is a symptom of societal collapse. The fascist ideology stands in diametric opposition to the principles of individualism, and it categorically rejects the notions of competitive elections. It manifests a unitary, autocratic regime that systematically and often violently suppressed any forms of perceived political dissent. The fascist state's modus operandi is characterized by ruthless extirpation of pluralistic political expression and the imposition of a monolithic power structure, the one-party system. So, at any point, if you see even a modern political party that tries to push the idea of a one-party system, that you can absolutely call fascist on any
And most extreme right-wing parties do want to do that.
side of the political spectrum, because at the end of the day, extremes touch. It's the horseshoe effect. And talking about individualism, in Benito Mussolini's own words, Benito Mussolini himself publicly stated that fascism is anti-individualistic and accepts the
Because it is. Again, it wants you to identify with the state first, but that is not leftist. That is right-wing. Why do you keep using these words to prime your audience to think it is leftist?
individual only in as far as the interests coincide with those of the state. So in other words, the fundamental trait that I'm trying to present today as we try to define what fascism is, it's its innate ideological fluidity, or hybridity, if you will, which is what allows it to connect easily with extremist ideas even when their core principles are different.
It's not very hybridical. No, it's right-wing. Why are you trying to make excuses for fucking fascists? What?
Fascism is characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized authority, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, usually belief in a natural social hierarchy, subordination of individual interests for the perceived good of the nation, a strong regimentation of society, big government, and control of the economy. Now, it's important to underline, however, that it's
Ooh, big lefty words. Fascism is not characterized by all of those things. Guys, he's literally just lying. Look up the 14 characteristics of fascism. They are on there, but they are secondary things to the main rules. He's literally lying and simplifying beyond simplicity so he can destroy the meaning of words. God, what? I don't want to watch this anymore.
historically, the control of the economy did not happen, at least in the very beginning. It's a little bit of a late stage version of fascism. What I mean by that is that initial fascist policies and positions when it comes to the economy were based on two major elements. Early fascist government was a massive proponent of privatization, and it pushed the idea of lowering taxes. Of course, to a modern American, both of these ideas would sound right-wing. With that being said, let's have a look at...
They're right-wing, but they don't have...
The economy.
So it's not exclusively right-wingers who want to increase taxes. Again, a war machine cannot survive unless the taxes and the standard of living of the population suffers. It is basic economy and war economy.
That characterized fascism after Mussolini had consolidated power was what we could call a...
So no, because he wanted to abolish individualism so that you would identify with the state, so you would go to war, so you can feed the war machine, so you would pay your taxes to feed the war machine. That doesn't mean it's leftist.
Dirigist economy, which is a market economy in which the state plays a strong directive role through economic interventionism and policies. All of this with the principal goal of achieving what is called autarky, or national economic self-sufficiency, a sort of state-directed capitalism which had some common elements with socialism.
No, it doesn't have any common elements with socialism. Metatron fundamentally does not understand socialism. If he thinks that fascism has anything to do with socialism, he fundamentally does not understand the concept of a socialist state.
Corporatism. This gave the fascists the ability to confiscate assets at their will while controlling the vast...
Which again is not socialist, but for his uneducated viewers, it seems scary socialist words. That's what he's trying to do here.
Majority of Italy's credit, generated by
And also, he's not mentioning all of the nationalism, the citizen, the thing about the other races. He's not mentioning any of that because he's priming you. He's poisoning the fuck out of the well, and he's not gonna mention the 14 rules of fascism because they disagree with him, fundamentally.
By the workforce. Yet now it doesn't sound right-wing anymore, does it? So why was there this fundamental change between early...
Yes, he still does sound right-wing because you misrepresent it. You fucking represent it here. And taking away people's things is not leftist, you moron. You are misrepresenting ideology first. That's the first mistake you're doing. You are not mentioning the widely accepted 14 rules of fascism. You are also not understanding what socialism is and what a Marxist perspective on the world is, because you cannot fundamentally understand what socialism is because you do not want to understand what socialism is. So your positions are irrelevant because you are misrepresenting things, first of all. Second of all, you have no fucking idea what socialism is.
Early fascism and late fascism were most likely the early fascist positions on economy, and all of that privatization when it comes to, for example, putting an end to the state control of life insurance, just to give you one, was a way to gain the votes and support of the bourgeoisie. And in fact, at the very beginning, when fascists
Do you even know what the bourgeoisie is? Fucking idiot.
raised to power, the Minister of Finance and Economy was a centrist, Alberto De Stefani, who was a massive supporter of free market, an element in common with modern-day American right-wing. That's until 1925, which is when Mussolini fired him. What about the...
You can be a market socialist, meaning that you are in favor of a free market that has socialist rules. And I will know because I'm a market socialist. And you do not have to be in favor of a planned economy says to be a socialist. You fundamentally do not understand what socialism is, so you are disqualified.
promise of lowering taxes. Oh, at first they did, but towards the end of the regime, what Mussolini ended up doing was raising taxes.
Of course, because at the end of the regime they were at war. At the end of the regime in the late 30s, they were at war with Ethiopia and they were in perpetual war, because that's what fascism leads to. Perpetual expansionist war, to feed a war machine. So yes, but he's disingenuous. He's not mentioning the fact that they were at war, because he hopes you forget. He's not mentioning the fact that this is how a war machine works, because he hopes you would forget.
And I mean a lot. And this in a way shouldn't really surprise us, because as we will see, Mussolini's roots were socialists, in the sense that this idea of collective sacrifice through taxation in order to give more power and more capability to the state was...
As I already say, but I'm gonna repeat it because he also likes to repeat himself. Mussolini started out as a disingenuous socialist. First of all, he was kicked out of the socialist paper he worked at because he was doing sassy shit, and he changed his views. He renounced socialism, right? If you don't, he denounced socialism. If you read his biography, he denounced socialism and declared himself a right-winger. But he didn't mention that, and he's not gonna. He's gonna skim right over the fact that debunks his whole theory.
Something that he had believed for over 14 years. So even though after being expulsed from the Socialist Party, as we will see in a second, and having this massive shift in political allegiances...
Ooh, snap, he mentioned it, but he's not going to actually go deeper into it.
His core tenets when it came to economy, as we see after he consolidated power, were still clearly rooted in socialism. That's...
No, they were not. Again, you misunderstand socialism. State control does not mean socialism. Evil does not mean socialism. I know for you they are, but they are not. You fundamentally do not understand, which is the problem with these videos. You do not understand socialism, and you are misrepresenting fascism to make it look more leftist so that you do not get associated with it.
Where the situation starts to become confusing. Because you see, even though this idea of big state, big government controlling the economy and having a lot to say when it comes to people's everyday lives clearly makes it sound left-wing from an American modern perspective, but then again, how much of the GDP...
From an American right-wing modern political perspective, because that's the audience you are pandering to.
The fascists spend for the strengthening of the military and for law and order, both concepts that tend to be quite right-wing today, at least in modern-day America. Because, I mean, what about the military strength and spending budgets of the Soviets, of the USA?
Hey, I have a fucking question. Law and order is right. So, do you see how his bias is showing through? Law and order is not right wing. What he means, police shooting? Is it that fucking law and order? No, law and order is not right wing. You stupid
So, you see why this is confusing? Another aspect that we can discuss is the idea of collective identity within the concept of the state. So, the idea of the ultra
The thing is that not what leftism is.
nationalism of fascists of 1940s Italy. Now, given, once again, if we want to look at this from the spectrum of modern American politics, then if we were to look at the average liberal versus the average conservative, then the ultra-nationalistic types tend to be found more often on the right wing of the spectrum. With that being said, what happens if we look at modern-day China? That is very nationalistic, but it's communist.
No, so China is not communist. China is a state capitalist country. China is not okay, so I'm gonna keep the heat down. China is not a communist state, Metatron. China is a nationalist, state capitalist, fascist right-wing state masquerading as leftist. And again, this proves that you fundamentally do not understand socialism.
Tend to be found more often on the right wing of the spectrum. With that being said, what happens if we look at modern day China? That is very national. One thing that I would like to say that I did forget to mention on my original video on Nazism when discussing the economic policies, and that is the idea of a wartime economy, which is of course different from a peacetime economy.
Oh shit, he's gonna mention, oh my god.
Now, this is something that was one of the elements of discussion brought up by this historian, and since he brought it up very eloquently, we're going to listen to him now.
Wartime is a completely different animal compared to peacetime. You know, people like to point at Abraham Lincoln and say what a tyrant he was because of certain things he did in times of war, in times of rebellion. Would he have done those things in times of peace, which is...
Oh my god, he understands the concept of a war economy. I underestimated him.
What really... To me,
This is not him, this is actually someone who's smart.
he determines what kind of a leader you are.
Thank you very much, Vlogging Through History. A very fair point. Another thing that is, common knowledge, but perhaps not everyone is aware of, is the fact that Mussolini, before becoming the Duce, and even before just starting the fascist movement, he was a socialist, in the sense that for 14 years he was a member, and in fact a very active...
Yes, but he wasn't a true socialist, as he was fucking denounced by a socialist, and he denounced himself socialism. He said he's no longer a socialist. God.
member of the Italian Socialist Party. The thing is that the Socialist Party during World War I was advocating for neutrality during the war, whereby Mussolini was already at that time a war agitator, so he completely disagreed, we could say, with the remaining members of the party, which led to his expulsion, something that clearly he wasn't very happy about. This is where we see historically a massive shift when it comes to Mussolini as a socialist himself, and then a pro-socialist, all the way up to considering the socialists as his enemies, and in fact starting hating the communists.
You are literally just debunking yourself right now by admitting this. I thought you weren't going to admit it because admitting this destroys your entire theory and your audience doesn't even see it, and apparently you don't even see it. How your admission right now destroyed your entire theory. Your entire thesis is gone just because of your admission here.
So once again, this can be confusing because when you hear socialist, oh, left-wing, and then you hear, but he hates the commies, well, that sounds right-wing. This once again connects to the opportunistic nature of fascism as a doctrine, if you will, to accumulate power. That is really the focal point, whether it be Nazism, whether it be communism, whether it be fascism. That is the focal point of dictatorships, is that their main objective, since they are totalitarian regimes, is to accumulate power by any means necessary. And these sort of leaders...
Yes, but this is not true leftism, because leftism say this is right wing. That's the problem. He thinks what the USSR did was leftist. This is his main problem. First of all, he kind of lies, but that's not his main problem. His main problem is that he does not understand leftism. So he cannot make a case, a true case.
These generational personae, in a negative sense, are willing to say anything, muster any flag, wear any color, as long as it takes and helps them focus and concentrate power. That's why, as I say, and as I said in the previous video, and as I will continue to say on this series, left-wing, right-wing, particularly from a modern perspective, isn't the best way to classify these historical regimes. In fact, all of them.
Yes, they are far right. Leftist is not the way to classify them, because also the Soviets weren't true leftists. He's literally admitting here, but he's still not gonna understand what leftism is. He's literally admitting here, but he can still not understand what leftism is, That's the thing. He does not understand what leftism is. And why he's fighting so hard for fascism to not be identified as right-wing is because he is a right-winger. And he does not want the fascist to be identified with his identity. That's literally why he's doing this.
They are dictatorial regimes. They are totalitarian dictatorships. It should have its own box and nomenclature. Regardless, this is what historically leads Mussolini's shift and when he starts the fascist movement called Fasci Italiani di Combattimento, and the rest is history. Alright, but what about Benito Mussolini's fixation with the past and recreating and bringing back the strength of...
That's right-wing as fuck.
Of ancient Rome, for example, so the past glory. This, of course, has to do with the type of propaganda that Mussolini was using. Fascism occurred during a time of crisis. So, of course, if people or the citizen are experiencing crisis and you present to them, well, look at the past, things were better back then clearly that's gonna work on a lot of them. And that's something that we see happening since the times of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. In fact, during the Roman Empire, what were the senatorial class and quite a few historians saying? Well, they were saying things were better during the Republic, we should bring it back. So that's nothing new. It's something that politicians have been doing constantly to gain public support.
Yeah.
And clearly, from a modern perspective, this being the key, if we look at Mussolini's values, of course they're going to sound very conservative, but then again, these are the 40s. In a similar...
No. The political spectrum didn't meaningfully change since then. He was still a far-right conservative. Why are you trying to run the fence and try to say, no, the fascists didn't have my ideology. No, the fascists actually had the ideology of my enemy. Guys, conservatives aren't fascists, guys. This is basically this video.
Way, if we were to ask ourselves what would Benito Mussolini think about, for example, minority rights or LGBTQ rights,
he's gonna say no.
Going to be anti-homosexuals, he's going to be opposed to anything that has to do with transgender.
Kind of like you. Are you a fascist? I don't know.
But that doesn't make him right-wing in the modern sense, it just makes him a person...
What? Yeah, it does make him right-wing. What the fuck? It does make him right-wing. What do you mean, man?
From his period, because once again, the reason why I say this is not, yes, it sounds more like some elements of the right in America, but then again, you would have found the exact same type of opposition in communist USSR. You think Stalin would have been,
yes, because they weren't communists, they weren't real leftists.
A massive proponent of minority rights, and
he doesn't understand leftism. That is his main problem. He doesn't understand leftism.
A supporter of LGBT, well, no, and yet he's very far left, right? So as you can see,
no, Stalin is not a leftist. You don't understand the concept of leftism.
That's the problem when we overlap the present with the past. Things don't work that way. Therefore, such comparisons become futile.
Just want to see how much
is
is left.
Foreign policy, Mussolini sought to expand Italy's influence and territories. This led to the invasion of Ethiopia in 1935 and, as we all know, an alliance with the Nazi during World War
Nazis and fascists have the same ideology.
II. Both decisions that will be disastrous for Italian history. What about the idea of authoritarianism? Can that be defined as something either right-wing or left-wing? Well, once again, it's one of those situations where, no, it can't.
Oh my god, I agree with him. Yeah, I agree with him here. His problem is that he still doesn't understand leftism.
Because if you look at all sorts of authoritarian regimes throughout history, whether they be far left, far right, however you...
There were never any far left authoritarian systems because those systems weren't leftist. Why does he keep making this mistake?
You want to call them authoritarianism is something that occurs at the extreme ends of both sections of the political axis, excusing the term.
It only happens in the extreme right, because true leftists, not Marxist Leninists, which aren't leftists, true leftists would never advocate for this. So yeah, as you can see what he's doing here, I can't stand him anymore. He keeps repeating himself. I don't want to watch him anymore. But yeah, this is basically his video. And yeah, as you can see, he's very, they were actually leftists. Like, this is his sentiment, basically. Like, whatever he wants to say, if you read between the lines, that's what he's saying. So yeah, we had fun with him. I didn't have fun. It really triggered me this. he really doesn't understand arguments in history. So yeah, I hope you guys had fun, and I will say this again. Please like if you like this, because I'm a small creator and I want to grow it. I want to start making more things that are not React content. And yeah, you can comment down below if you want me to make a video on the 14 rules of fascism, and I will make a video explaining each of the 14 rules of fascism in detail. It will take a while for me to make that, but do comment down below if you want to see a video of me explaining each rule of fascism, where it fits, and yeah, and how fascism works, because apparently there is a very wide misunderstanding of fascism online. So I want to fix that. So comment down below if you want to see that, and make sure to like, because I really want to grow, and share this if you like it. And yeah, okay, bye bye.